this video, we're going to talk about $state service, which is available as part of UI Router. If you are already familiar to ng-route, then $state service is very similar to $route service in ng-route. Okay, let's jump into UI Router's state service. What exactly is state service in UI Router? Whenever I would like to have more control on how UI Router can be used as part of our application, then I can make use of $state service. So whenever I say more control, which means you are trying to access more features available as part of UI Router to make your application more powerful. So what are all the various features I can really access or make use of UI Router? Imagine I am currently on a particular state or on a particular route. How would I refresh it, or how do I reload it? So if you would like to reload or refresh any particular route, we can make use of $state service. Again, imagine I would like to fetch some information related to a particular state or particular route, then we can make use of state service. And imagine I would like to really fetch the details of the current state and then play with those parameters and so on related to the current state, then we can still make use of $state service. So which means you can literally work with any state, access any of those parameters, reload those states or modify those particular parameters, refresh the routes, and all of those things can be easily accomplished using $state service. And not just those, imagine I would like to navigate from one state to another or from one route to another without really using URLs or UI srefs, what we have been seeing earlier, then we can still make use of $state service. So which means, imagine inside a click event, I would like to really switch to some other route. How would I do that without really using URL or UI sref? Then $state service is the way to go. Okay, what are all various members available as part of state service? So first of all, state is a service which can be injected into any of your controllers. And the moment you inject $state into the controller, then you have access to $state object, which essentially contains all of these properties. So which means you literally have current and params. So I can simply access $state.current. And the current is literally having parameters, data, and several other UI state related information, and you can access all of those. So in order to access the current parameters, of course you can always use $state parameters as covered in my previous video. But apart from that, you can still make use of $state service in order to access current state related parameters by just simply saying $state.current.params. And apart from current.params, you also have another property called params, which is in one way or another very similar to how you are trying to access the other way using current.params. So you can also access the same parameters using $state.params. This is just an alternative way. And apart from the properties, you have these four main methods. So which means in order to reload or refresh the current state or current route, you can always use $state.reload. You can also make use of Go and use the reload feature by sending the reload options. So which means state.go essentially can be used to navigate from one state to another or from one route to another. And whenever you are rerouting to some other state, you can also provide the options to reload that state or refresh that state with new parameters. You can also make use of the same Go member or same Go method in order to refresh the current route also by providing the reload options. And on top of that, you also have get. So get is mainly used to get more information or fetch more information about the current route or any other state, whatever you mention. So in order to get some information about a particular state, you can always use get. If you don't provide any state name, it just simply returns all the currently available states, and you can make use of those particular members by just simply saying dot. So I can say $state.get, and you will have all the array or collection of those particular states, and you can access first one, second one, third one, dot, and still you can access params and other related members. You can also test whether our particular state is currently the state you would like to have in the conditional status. So which means I can use this is method in order to simply and dynamically test whether your particular current state is matching with whatever the state you are trying to provide. So this is mainly used for if conditions or conditional validation of the current state. And apart from that, you can use this to get more information about a state. You can use Go to navigate from one state to another. You can also use Go to reload the current state with more options, or particularly reload to just to reload or refresh the current state. Apart from the above, you also have all these particular events. Those are state change start, state change success, and so on. These are the events which are mainly used to actually keep track of those particular navigations you are actually doing across your particular application. So which means whenever you switch from one state to another, these are the state related events which are going to be fired. So this is going to be fired immediately whenever you are going to switch from one state to another, and by actually handling this event you have access to previous state and even the next state what you are going to switch to. Similarly, this is the event which is going to be fired once your switching has been successful. If it is not successful and if it is actually throwing an error, the third event is the one which is going to be firing. And if you'd like to handle any kind of state which is running into no state, so which means you're trying to access a state which is not available, then this is the event which is going to be fired. So these are the mainly used members which are available as part of state service, and of course there are several other where you can simply get through the documentation. So let us jump into some code. Okay, so this is a simple HTML file where I'm having some kind of SPA based layout where I'm going to have a header and home and just a left panel and the right panel, and the left panel is just simply showing a particular link to this state called calculator, and from here whenever that particular state is going to be loaded, it is going to load actually in this UI view. So the moment I click on this calculator, it essentially goes to this calc which is defined in this manner. So this calc essentially goes to our calc.html which is defined in this way, which is going to show us just two input boxes A and B, and those are automatically bound to A and B of the members of scope. And on top of that, you can see it actually works with calculator controller which is defined in this fashion. So right now A and B are defaulted to zeros, and those particular values will be automatically reflected as part of the template you have mentioned right here. And whenever this state gets loaded, this template gets loaded and gets bound to this controller. So let us see how this is going to be shown. And let me refresh this. And currently there is no route here, so I just click on this, and now you can see A and B related members are actually defined with zeros, and they have been automatically made available to our UI view. And you can see calculate.html is the one which is exactly downloaded, as because that is the template you have mentioned. Okay, so now let us actually add a new state. So the main meaning of this particular state in this case is actually whenever I have a button here which says do some or some kind of operation here, the moment I click on this button, it has to navigate to some other state, and that particular state has to show me the result. So I need to have A and B values to be summed up, and the result needs to be shown in some other state, and that particular state is the one what we are going to develop now. So I'm going to say something like a new state, and I would like to call the name of the state as add with the necessary options I'm going to provide here. Okay, so this particular state currently has to go to some URL, so which means I need to specify the routing URL. So in this case I am going to say add, and it is going to accept two parameters which are going to be stored in A and B respectively. And then I can specify template URL which is actually supposed to show our result in the form of HTML. So which means the result of A and B, that is A plus B, needs to be shown as part of this template. And in order to work with all of these, I would need a controller, and I would like to call this controller as add controller in this case. So this is pretty simple state configuration. So I have the routing URL with the parameters set, template URL, of course I still need to define result.html, and I need to create add controller as well. So let me create add controller right here. So I just would like to copy whatever I have in here so that I can just get rid of whatever I already have in place. And the name of this controller is going to be add controller. So I just copy that here. So I would like to make use of the scope anyway, so I'm going to still make use of it. And at the same time, I would like to calculate the values, that is the sum of those two parameters A and B. So I am going to get those two values into these two parameters. This could be P and Q or M and N. Any of those particular parameter names will be working for us. But in this case I chose A and B, so I need to have those two variables or those two parameters to be made accessible as part of my controller. So for that purpose I am going to use $state parameters because I wanted to access those two parameters A and B. So I am going to use $state parameters right here. So which means I need to inject into the function as well. So in that way I have access to state parameters. So I'm going to define something like if $state parameters has A already defined, so which means if I get those two values there, then I would like to define scope.a equal to $params, that is state parameters.a. So similarly I am going to say for B also. So if the user provides the value of B, then this should also take to the values of B. But imagine A or B are not provided, then you would like to have some kind of initialization process to be done before even you assign to it. So I would like to assign some kind of default values to A and B for this controller. So if those values are not provided, like A and B are not provided, those will be actually defaulted to zeros. Okay, and now I would like to have the result to be calculated, which is nothing but sum. So I am going to say scope.result equal to, in this case I just would like to convert my value of scope.a to integer, and then similarly convert another, that is scope.b. So I am summing up A and B, and the result is going to be stored in result. So this is just another member in the scope which is going to be defined as part of our result.html. So I'm going to make use of that in result.html. So let me create a new file called result.html, and inside this result all I'm going to do is create a couple of divs so that I can actually retrieve the member result and just display that right here. So I'm going to say show this div if and only if a member result is actually present as part of the scope. So I'm going to say calculated result. This is just literal, that is part of your markup, and I'm going to use the result as part of our binding. So you are trying to actually access this result member right here, and in this case this is not necessary, but as mentioned, if you are trying to add any kind of progress bar or something like that, then you can make use of it. So currently let me consider I just wanted to remove that. Okay, so now I need to go to calculate.html and add a new button here so that it actually comes up right here. So I need to have a new button here which actually takes these two values and send to the new state. So for that purpose I am going to say something like a new button needs to be added, and that needs to be actually assigned to a particular click event. So in this case I would like to call that one as do add, and the caption of the button is going to be add. So whenever I click on this button, it is going to execute do add, which is expected in the current scope. So the current scope of calculate.html in this case is actually our calculate.controller, that is calc controller. You can see our calculate controller is the one which is working with calculate.html. So there is no add click event currently present here. So I need to define that as part of my scope, and I am going to say scope.doAdd function. Okay, so this is the function which is going to be executed the moment I click on that button. So if I click this, it is going to be here. So what do I need to do here? I need to switch to this particular state add. So I am currently in calculator, so which means you are currently in this route calculator. So you are trying to switch from this calculator to add. So for that purpose I need to work with $state service. So in order to work with $state service, the first thing is that I need to inject it. So I need to say something like $state. So which means I'm saying that I would like to use my $state service as part of this controller, and also I'm going to use $state there. And now here I am going to say $state.go. So go is the method which gives us the flexibility to switch from one state to another. So in this case I am saying that please switch to state add. So what is the state add? That is nothing but this guy. So I'm giving the same name of that one right here. And while I'm giving that, I can also provide any kind of parameters if that state is expecting in the form of a JSON object. So in this case, you can see our add is actually expecting A and B values. So in order to provide those two values in the form of an object, I am going to get the current values of A and current value of B as well. So from the current controller, it actually takes A and B, assigns to this object, sends to the state add, and that particular add is going to receive those two values into two new variables called A and B, which are still going to be made used as part of your add controller. So you are going to access those two new variables A and B as part of state parameters in add controller, and you are assigning those to, so this is a typo. So you are going to assign those two right inside your scope A and scope B respectively to your add controller. So this scope is different from this scope, and these A and B are different from this A and B. So these could be M and N as well. So those could be anything. And finally, once you are actually doing the sum, it is going to put into result, which is going to be shown as part of your result.html right here. So let us see if everything is working fine with no issues. So I go in here, go home, refresh this, and click on the controller, and now you can see I have add. So now I go to 1, 2, so it means 10 and 20. The moment I click on add, you can see it has actually downloaded result.html, and that result.html by default has got whatever we had defined in our template, but it could understand that it has to do the sum of 10 and 20 as because we switched it to the route add by actually sending the values 10 and 20. So those 10 and 20s are actually reflected into A and B, which are being retrieved using state parameters and finally being added, put into result, and that particular result is actually applied right here. So in that way, I have a simple way of accessing the state service by actually injecting $state service and at the same time using the go method to actually navigate from one state to another. So imagine I would like to have the back button. Why? Because you can see right here I can't go back until and unless I click calculator again. So what I would like to see is once I am in the new state and once I click add, I would like to have a simple back button here which can actually simply go back to the previous state, or say in this case calculate state. So for that I would like to have a new addition to our result. Why? Because the result is the one which is supposed to show that. So I'm going to add an anchor tag, and in this case I just would like to use our famous UISref which is covered in my previous video, and I would like to say please go to calculate. So that is the state name and just a separator. So there is no href needed, so just need to remove this guy. Okay, so that was the mistake. I need to provide something like back button here. Now I go back, and now just go to refresh, go to calculator, and I'm going to say something like 10 and 20 and click add, and now you can see I have a back button here, and the moment I click on back you can see it has simply switched to the previous state. And imagine I would like to perform the same kind of calculator related back button using programming rather than UISref. So for that purpose, so in this case I just wanted to provide something like this so that it shows in a better fashion. And now I would like to create an button instead of a UISref or the anchor tag. So in this case I would like to have a button which actually says something like back. So this particular back is going to actually access go back method, which is supposed to be expected as part of our current scope. So you can do result related controller. So result related controller is actually add controller. So our add controller is expected to have that go back method. So I need to define a new go back method as part of our controller. So for that purpose, I'm going to say something like go back right here. You can define at any location, but I just would like to make sure that it is actually defined at any location in this fashion, that is $state.go. And in this case, I am going to say please go back to calculator. But are we using $state here? There is no $state which has been injected, so I really need that to be injected here. So I am going to say $state, and I am going to use the $state in the function, and finally I have that $state being used and accessing the go method, which actually expects the calculator state with no parameters. So let me save this, and I go home, refresh this, go to calculator, I go to 10 and 20 and click add, and now you are going to see the back button and also our UI sref. Of course you can use either of these two in this case, and the moment I click on back, you can see it is automatically switching to calculator. So now we can understand like how we can use the $state service in order to switch from one state to another using the go method. I would like to have more to be understood on what are all the features available as part of $state. So which means I would like to know what are all the methods and what are all the properties a state service may have. So for that, I just would like to check by just simply saying console.log $state. So that is the easiest way on exploring the $state object. So this is going to be showing if and only if we are in the add controller, or probably I can also make that to be made available here, so that once I click on go back, I just would like to show the entire object information here. You can put anywhere. So I go back here, I go home, click calculator, and I'm going to say 10 and 20 here. So let me clear everything, whatever I have in place, click add. And now I click back. Now you can see this is the $state service, and you always have the current property, which actually gives us the current controller, the name of the state, and at the same time the template it is currently assigned to, and the routing URL. And on top of that, you also have the params object. So this params currently state couldn't give you parameters here, as because the calculator is the route which doesn't have any kind of parameters. So if I move this one to top, and let us see how this is going to show now. So I go home, refresh this, click calculator, 10 and 20, and click add. And now let us see how the state service is showing us. Now I open the parameters, and now you can see it is actually showing A and B as the parameters which are having 10 and 20. So instead of actually using $state parameters here, other way is actually using $state.params.a. That is just another way. So similarly, if I use current here, you can also use current.parameters. So let us modify our code a bit. So instead of using $state.parameters, so I just wanted to comment this. So instead of writing $scope.a equal to, instead of using $state parameters, I'm going to use $state.params.a. And similarly, I can also make use of B right here. So if you are using $state everywhere, then you don't need to inject $state parameters at all. So you can just remove these two. So I just wanted to leave it like that for now. So I go back here, refresh this, and now I'm going to say 10 and 20, and still it should work with no issues. Now you can see I still got the same thing. Okay, and on top of that, we can also make use of $state.get. So which means it can actually show all the information related to all the states by just writing this. So this actually gives us the list of all the states configured. So in this case I have 4 states, and in general it not only gives all these 4 states information but also any kind of built-in states what it has calculated based on your configuration of the states. But if you really would like to have more information about a particular state, then I can just specify please get all the information related to a particular state called add, and that actually gives us the information only related to add but not everything else. So again, so let me go home, refresh this, I go to calculator and 10 and 20 and click add, and now if you open this you can see it actually shows us the information related to only the state add by just displaying its controller, its name, and the templated information and URL how it is supposed to be configured. So that is how you can use $state.get. Okay, so this is pretty much about $state, but let us do something more. That is, imagine I would like to have some defaults or some custom information to be provided for this state. You can always provide some external data using an attribute called data. So literally you can provide any kind of information in the form of JSON here. Even though the documentation says only data, you can also provide any other information. I can say employee, and I can just provide whatever the information you would like to provide here. Similarly, customer, and provide whatever the information you would like to have here. So you don't necessarily be working only with the data, but the documentation says anything resembles data is some external data. So we better be with this until and unless there is a very good reason to use something else other than data. So let me remove this, and imagine I would like to provide some variable, something like multiplier 10. So which means I'm saying that this member is always available through this data object to be used by this add controller whenever I'm using this state add. So this state add has got this information to be automatically accessible using $state service. So how do you use it? Let's go down all the way and make use of it. So in this case, I would like to have that particular variable to be accessible by using $state. So I can say $state, go to the current state and get the object data, which is nothing but the above one. So this is the data object. This is the data object. So data.multiplier. So I can just use data.multiplier right here. So let me actually do the bracket here so that it will have a better calculation. So first of all, it does the sum of these two and then multiplies with the value 10, whatever it is supposed to receive from. So let me see if everything is working fine. So I refresh this. So there is some typo somewhere. So let me just fix that. Okay, I missed this. So I don't need a semicolon right here. So I just need to remove that. So I go back here. Let me refresh this. Calculate it. 10, 20, click add, and now you can see I actually got 300 because 10 plus 20 is 30, and 30 into 10, which is actually retrieved from the multiplier member, and 30 into 10 becomes 300. So in that way you can always access some custom information available in the $state using $state service. Okay, so the next one is using AJAX as part of your routing. So till now we have been working everything at the client side. Now I would like to actually fetch the information from the server side and then get the results from the server side and inject into our current view. So how do I accomplish that? So for that purpose, I am already having a Node.js application currently running here. So you can see I have Node app running at localhost 8000. That is a simple app which is actually performing some kind of add operation based on whatever the values you provide. So we can quickly check from using Postman and how it is trying to add. So I have that in the form of express calculate. So you can see these two are currently the endpoints made available as part of my server-side application, that is Node.js in this case. So you can use this kind of URL like API add, provide those two values, and it knows how to get the values out of those two. Similarly, multiply, and it knows how to get the values of those two as well. So if I click on this and open in Builder, we can quickly test on how it is going to work. So it is a get operation on this particular URL, which is 8000, as because we are listening at 8000 here. So the moment I click on send, you can see the values of 10 and 20 are going to be summed up and returned in the form of 30. So I have an intentional delay here, like 3 to 5 seconds. I think in this case 4 seconds, not sure what it is, but whatever the value you provide here and click send, it is going to have some kind of delay, so that we can make use of that delay in our application in a proper way. And now you can see it has got the result as well. So I would like to access this URL, and those two values need to be sent to the server, and the server responds the result in the form of some kind of value, and I would like to get that value and get it injected into our UI view. So in order to communicate with that AJAX, I currently wrote a simple data service. So I just wanted to make use of that in my application. So I go to C, and this is my test. I just would like to make use of this, and if you open data service, you are going to see this. So currently you can see I am already configured to 8000 API, and add is the method which is exposed out of my service, and multiply is another method. So during the add, I am actually doing a HTTP request to add with those two values provided in the function using the get method, and it actually results the promise out of it. So I just would like to make use of this service in my application. So for that purpose, the first thing is that I really need to use that in my script tag right here. So I just would like to use data service to be used as part of my application. So that is the data service right here, and I need to inject that into my controller, as because currently add is the controller which does this operation. So instead of doing this operation in this way, I would like to have the calculation to be done at the server. So the server access is always available through data service. So I need to inject that right here, and similarly right here. And I'm going to access that service using this variable here, and in order to access that, all I have to do is dot add. So that is the method which has been exposed, and it takes two parameters. So currently those parameters are nothing but our scope.a and scope.b. So those two are the values we are going to send, and once I get the result out, it is going to be made available as part of result, and in using this result, I will be actually placing the value into this result. So this is the result whatever we receive from the server. It could be R or whatever. So let me put R so that it's not going to be confused. So the server results in the form of R.data, which contains whatever the value it is going to return, 30 or 40 or whatever the value it has calculated. And of course I need to have my multiplier also to be used, as because I would like to take advantage of that value as the multiplier as well. So multiplier with whatever the value we receive from the server is going to be placed in the result. So once it is in the result, it knows how to display right inside here. So let us see if everything is working fine. I just refresh it again, clear everything. So you can see right now I am on calculate.html 1, 2. So that is 10 and 20. Let me clear all the requests, click on add. And now you can see result.html is already there, and now I have the calculation from the server. So how does it calculate from the server? So if you see here, you can see it is actually going through localhost 8000 API at 10 and 20. If you click this, you can see the result is 30. So that 30 is actually returned back and multiplied with our multiplier, and finally we are getting the result back. So let me clear again, and of course I don't need that, so let me actually comment this one so that we'll be focusing on what we really need. Okay, let me refresh this. So I give 20 and 30 now. I click add. You can see it is displaying the view, but it is still delayed because it is actually getting the information from the server. So that delay is artificial in this case. So let me actually do once again and observe how it is doing. So I click again add. The view is already displayed. However, the result is still delayed, and finally we have this. So there exists a small delay as because we are actually getting that information from the server, and server is taking a bit more time in order to calculate something. Okay. So when the server is doing some manipulation, I would like to show something like, some kind of progress message here, and I would like to show this entire text if and only if I retrieve the results. So then the user can easily understand, oh, it is doing some kind of process at the server, and once the server is completed its action, I should be expecting some result. So that kind of message is always good for the user to really show. So let me modify our application a bit so that it actually shows some kind of progress. So for that, I'm going to add a new member called is loading. So by default I would like to say true, so which means I'm saying that it is currently loading, and I'm going to use this variable right inside my result. So similarly I go back here and I'm going to say is loading equal to false, so which means once the server has completed, then means it is successfully completed, and once it has completed I would like to put into result, and I would like to immediately switch is loading to false from true, so which means it is not loading anymore. So I just save this, and now let us go back here. So that is our result, and I am going to say something like another div. So in this case the div has to show if and only if is loading equal to true. So in this case I am going to say some span style equals color red, and I am going to say loading please wait or something, whatever the message you would like to show. And I do not want this div to be shown whenever it is actually loading, so I'm going to just give the opposite of this guy. So I'm going to say something like ng hide. So let us see if this is working fine. So I go back here, click home, refresh this, I go to calculator, I provide 10 and 20 and click add, and now you can see it is actually showing that loading please wait, and once it is done you can see we got the result, everything along with whatever the message you have provided, and also from the server whatever it has returned. So let us test once again. I provide 20 and 30 and click add. Now you can see it is working as the way we are expecting it to be. Okay, so that is pretty much on how you can actually show progress messages while we are switching from one state to another and doing some kind of AJAX operations. Clear. Now let us jump into events. So this is a bit different concept. That is, those events, whatever we discussed so far, those are change, start, change success, change error, and so on. So how do I work with these events and keep track of how we are actually switching from one state to another? Of course, you can also accomplish that easily by actually adding event handlers to those events using the root scope. So for that I can just make use of run, whatever we have in place, and using the run, the first thing is that we will be working with root scope, so I need to inject that, and the root scope whatever I have provided here, so which means those events can only be handled right from the root scope. So using the root scope, I'm going to say on the event of, that is $state change start, I would like to have my own function to be executed. So that is the simplest way of actually adding your event handler. So which means this function is going to be executed every time a particular state is actually emitting this event. So if this event is raised, your function is going to be executed. And who is going to raise this event? UI router itself. So UI router has got this event, and UI router framework knows when to raise this event, which actually gives us more information from what state you are switching to another state. So all that information can be easily accessible through various parameters whatever UI router is going to be giving us whenever you would like to handle that event. That is, event information is always available in E, and to which state you are currently switching to, that is in the form of toState. This is just a variable. You can provide t also. Any variable is good. And any parameters, and from which state you are actually trying to switch from, so that is from state, and from state parameters if they have any, and if there are any options on top of it. So all of that information is readily available for you, and you can always make use of that and write to console, or probably you can use it in one way or another by just getting those variables related information. So all I can say in this case is I am currently in start change event. Of course, I am not yet using any of these particular variables, so that is just for your information. And similarly, I would like to use success, and I would like to use success here. And of course, success has got something different, that is, it doesn't have options. So there are no options provided by the UI router for that. So you still have access to toState, two parameters, from state and from parameters. Okay, I need to provide this and this right here. Okay, so I go back there, go home, refresh this, and now you can see it has actually provided state change stat and state change success. So it was trying to start this to change the state, and once it has done, immediately it is going to fire this guy. So let me clear everything and click on calculator. Now I am switching to a new state, and you can see how the events are being fired. And similarly, let me clear this. I go to 1, 2 and click add. Now you can see still it is showing us start and success of the next route. So if I'd like to have more information, yes. So the easiest way to know what is going on, I would actually simply log the object first and then get whatever I need from that object. So that is the easiest way on how I can get more information. So let me clear everything and click refresh. Okay, now you can see in the change stat, this is the first one is toState and the second one is from state. So if I go back here, this is the toState. So I'm saying that we are actually switching to this particular state. And what is the from state? So right now there is no from state in general. So that is the pretty root or the master of our application. So let us clear everything, and now I jump to calculator. So which means you are switching from the root to the calculator state. So once I do this, so you can see you are actually switching toState as calculator and the from state as the root. So let me clear everything here, and I can also say 10 and 20 and click add. Now you are going to jump from calculator to add. So the moment I do that, you can see I have access to add, and at the same time the from is actually calculated. So how do I just get the name? The simplest way, you are already working with the same object. All you have to do is just get data. I mean the property name, that is name. So similarly, if you wanted to access any kind of data, you can just provide data here. So how do I get that? Just name gives the name of that particular state. If you would like to have the data, just do this, and so on. So that is the easiest way on how to pull more information related to that particular event by accessing those variables. So this is pretty much about what you have in $state, and in the coming up videos we are going to look into multiple nested views and nested states and so on.